Well, Tim, thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in San Diego. I'm in the middle of a Master's of Systems Engineering in Space Systems program at Embry-Riddle. The lunar missions coming up is something I talk with folks about probably a few times a week. I'm part of the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium as well, and so I'm neck deep in a lot of the things that we're going to probably talk about here today. And I'm really excited to hear your perspective and the things that you're thinking about.
Now, Embry-Riddle, they're in Florida, right?
They are in Florida. They've got a worldwide campus that offers master's degrees online that I'm a part of.
Okay. And what do you think about it?
I really like it. My first class was I had a terrific professor, and that kind of set the tone for everything else. There's loads of space nuts in my other class, in the various classes I've had, and so it's been really interesting. And most of them are interested in human space flight, but they've had challenges finding degree programs in human space flight. So a lot of them ended up going into unmanned systems just because that's the closest thing. But recently they Embry-Riddle started offering this graduate certificate program, which at least has one course in life support systems. So it's getting closer, but it's been kind of a frustrating in between world for a lot of folks not being able to find human spaceflight centered degree programs. So it's tongue in cheek.
Yeah, the reason I ask is personally motivated. Rice University here in Houston has a space systems master's class as well. And so I've been
Okay.
debating going to that in person, which that would be kind of amazing at this point anywhere,
Yeah.
versus doing
Right.
something online. And um, I'm kind of curious in what the online options might look like, and maybe I'm missing
You
out.
know, so I don't really notice. I kind of miss the camaraderie of the classroom. I'll certainly admit to that. But in terms of quality of content and the ability to learn and take on new ideas and things like that, I haven't seen a huge difference. Houston's tough to compete with if human space flight's your thing. I'm sure Rice has got a really great program with Johnson Space Center right out the back door. Um, but overall, the online experience, I've made a few friendships along the way. Um, a lot of the professors are more apt to use video presentation materials and things like that to get people to kind of look and talk with each other, and there's an expectation. So I'll give you an example. Every course has got a discussion every week, and so you'll kind of post your initial thought on a subject. Let's say it's robotics in extreme environments, and you'll offer a solution or a certain system that's a great example of robotics dealing with extreme environments. And then it's always required that people kind of reply to your posts and offer their own feedback and insights. And so there is some healthy discussion that goes on there. I don't feel like I've lost anything by doing all online, except for the classroom camaraderie, which is kind of not really why we're there, but it's a nice side benefit. So I don't know if those comments help you at all or not, but that's my experience.
Yeah, and honestly, my work is always online. And I kind of created this project originally to force me to get out of the house every day and at least talk to one human in person. Of course, that's kind of
Right.
went sideways, but at least it's given me the option to talk to you and other people that I won't physically have access to.
Sure.
So I kind of going to school in person, it, since there's only so much you can stand looking at a screen.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I get it. And unfortunately, my office. So my day job is with the Navy as a contractor, and I'm also an officer in the Navy Reserve. But my day job, I go, I see people every day, and we wrestle with problems about how to fix ships that are breaking, and so yeah, you get that connection.
Yeah,
So I get it. I totally get it.
and one question I ask a lot of people is, when did you know that we're going to the moon in 2024? And when you found out, I can almost bet you know, and it was probably March of 2019. I could almost.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Um, I wasn't that in tune with Artemis when it was first announced, but as I was transitioning out of the Navy for a second time, I kind of looked around and realized, and this was August of 19. And then I realized, oh, we're going back to the moon. And they say it's for real this time, and you know, all the other things behind it. So maybe now it's time to kind of pivot back. And human spaceflight has been in a weird sort of place for the last 10, 15 years. And then when it comes to lunar exploration, you know, with the last 50 years. So it was nice to see that, and it's been an interesting challenge to try and pivot back into that industry after not being there doing the care and feeding when times were different.
Yeah,
So what
exactly.
prompted this project for you? Tell me a little bit more about kind of what you're trying to do and accomplish.
Sure. It's a personal development project at its most core. I've been working from home for the past 2 years. There would be like days and weeks that I could go without actually interacting with people besides my family. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going to go and talk to random strangers at the coffee shop and ask them if they know we're going back to the moon and what they think about it, that type of thing. Um,
Okay.
and from like December to the mid-March, I interviewed people on the streets of Houston, at the coffee shops, in the store. I went to Minneapolis for work, and I interviewed people on the streets there.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to we have an office in York, UK. So, I interviewed people in London and York, and I took a weekend trip to Edinburgh. And so it's been kind of cool, because you run by people all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, it might be kind of cool to meet them, but you really need like a pretext, right? A
Right.
context to
Or an
meet them.
icebreaker.
An
Yeah.
icebreaker, so saying, hey, I'm doing this project. Can I have a discussion with you? Kind of provides that box to then kind of meet people. And some people honestly, uh, like I've ever since I started the project in the mid part of December, I've done one every single day. Some days has been really close. Like there's like one day it's 11:30 p.m. at night, and I still hadn't interviewed anybody. All the people I tried fell through and what have you. I'm like, who can I interview? And I found a friend's father from high school online. Um, who lived in like Washington State, and they're like
Mm-hmm.
2 hours behind us, so that worked out. So days
Nice.
saved. Yeah.
Well, good for you. And I think your goal was 1,000, right?
Well, so Doug Laverio, who was the associate administrator, he had that lapel pin where he was counting down the days to the end of
Yeah.
2024. And he was doing his hero of the day, where he was like highlighting that NASA employee. So
Mm-hmm.
that triggered the framework. So I'm counting down to the end of 2024.
Wow. So you're going to try and make one connection every day from now until 2024. That is a bold ambition.
It is. It is. It can sometimes be really time consuming, and I don't have that many friends. So it's like,
Right. Well, you got one more now at least.
that's awesome. And, Astrobotics is sending a probe to the moon next year. I'm sure you must be all up on the details on that.
Yeah. So that would be Viper, right?
Actually,
Well, no,
Viper
no, no, no. It's before Viper.
2023. Yep.
Yeah, Viper's 2023. I can't remember which one's going up next for Astrobotic.
I think it's called the Peregrine Moonlander, if I'm not wrong.
Oh. It's not Peregrine, but it's yes. I know it. I know it's. I know what you're talking about. Um, yeah. So it's named after the Falcon. Peregrine's not quite the right pronunciation, but yes, I think maybe Peregrine is the right pronunciation. Maybe I'm wrong. I remember which one you're talking about now. Yeah, it was interesting. I was in a ISRU supply and demand conference yesterday, listening to Astrobotic and kind of what they've got going on. But yeah, they've got that going. And I
Well,
think Cold Arm is going up soon as well, if I remember right.
yeah, I hadn't heard of Code Arm.
Cold Arm.
Cold Arm,
So
yeah.
yeah, Cold Arm. So Cold Arm is all about testing the bulk metallic glass gears and power transmission systems
Oh, right.
for cryogenic environments. So that's going to hit soon as a technology demonstration, primarily to see if they can go into. So right now they've got it tested down to negative 100 degrees Celsius, which is not quite down to permanently shadowed regions, right? That's negative 240. But they're trying to get there, and so they're trying to figure out how they're going to get down into those PSRs and do work and do science and find ice, and that's what everybody's. Most of the conference yesterday on ISRU supply and demand, or excuse me, it was Thursday, was about the was all about finding ice and making water.
Yeah, and I was watching Dynetics did kind of like an overview of their lunar landing system and utilization stuff for AIAA. And I was just watching that last night, and it's just amazing what's on the horizon. You know, it feels real.
Yeah, their reveal caught a lot of people's attention, especially the kind of having the chassis that has different modules that plug into it rather than it being a dedicated system. I think a lot of people found that really, really interesting. There's big debates about methyl locks versus hydrogen architectures, mainly because of the storage requirements for H2. But even if somebody, even kicking that system over to methyl locks, just the whole concept of having detachable, deployable modules that are interchangeable, and you slap on that propulsion chassis. That's got it turned a lot of heads.
Yeah, it's gonna, and they're saying that it's completely reusable, and they plan to, you know, buy fuel from other people on the moon, maybe in supply depots circling the moon or what have you. It'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, and it's that a big part of the discussion, and what was really came out of the ISRU conference yet on Thursday was, I think people for right now are trending more towards storing it as water and then breaking up by electrolysis and condensing it kind of on demand, which is kind of interesting because it still takes a lot of power to do that as well. But no, there's a lot of chicken and egg conversations about how to get all this going. One company, which was, I gotta look them up. Their main product is called the Sunflower. They're out of LA. I cannot remember what the name of the company is. Astra something. Anyway, they've already got options sold for buying propellant in Geo.
Oh, really?
They're taking money from customers now to buy water in Geo.
I mean, that's a whole thing that you just touched on there, an options market for space resources. Go ahead
Yes.
and pre-sell the thing even before you get there, and
Yes.
you have the guaranteed price. You know.
Right. Right. So these guys have done it. They didn't reveal who bought it. They didn't reveal why they bought it. But they they slapped up some pricing and things like that. I'll have to flip it to you if I can. I emailed it to myself. I'll email it to you. Um, the pricing was interesting, and hopefully the company's name is on that slide as well. But yeah, like people were just stunned that this guy's getting. He said, yeah, it's been this down payment on these options have been the bulk of our funding for this particular year of operations.
I mean,
And the VCs were just coming out of the woodwork wanting to know, like, what are they doing? Why, I don't know. They didn't. It was interesting. The comment from the VCs was, I don't care so much what price they're buying it. I care about why they're buying it.
and I mean,
Which is, of course, somebody. Go ahead.
if you could get those listed on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and like be able to leverage that legitimacy, I mean, you talk about really kind of create that market.
Yeah, yeah, yes, I'm with you. And so yeah, it was a fascinating conversation. And like I said, if I can, I'll I know I emailed it to myself. I'll try and email you that pricing, and hopefully that might be of interest to you as well while you're going through this adventure. So where are you at now in terms of what you do, and what are you looking to do?
Yeah, so I work for a software company based in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
We have an engineering group in New York, and that's where we actually got founded, which is why I went there. But I actually, it's called Anaplan. We make a software product that's used. It's like Excel, but it's web-based and allows for you to create multi-dimensional kind of modules and link them through formulas and what have you. And it's
Okay.
very fast at calculating. So if you ever done Excel with like a whole bunch of VLOOKUPs and just started scrolling down and just like frozen, it solves that problem for sure. Um,
Right.
but so it doesn't have any direct applications. It's kind of like back when I was graduating from high school, the internet was taking off, and then that led into one software job, one software job, one software job, and ended up here. So you kind of have that. Maybe you could call that catastrophic success in the sense that you're kind of like,
Yeah.
locked into the software thing and you're like dreaming about the space thing. And you're like, do I really want to get locked into one company? Or is this kind of nice to be part of like the groupies that are going to cheer everybody on?
Mhm. Well, the nice thing is you got Ames right in the backyard, and there's one other center up there. I can't remember I can remember which the other one is. Um, Ames and one other NASA center. Anyway, so you know the natural fit from what I've so I'm pivoting from the military to the space industry. So I get the challenge of making the shift. The automatic thing that pops up in my mind is systems engineering, systems architecture, and simulation. And so I'm assuming is that something that you've looked at all?
Not really. I mean, that sounds fantastic.
It's a
It,
very natural fit for what you've been doing. Very natural fit.
I mean,
Um, Go ahead.
I did see a SpaceX job based in like Houston, Texas, to be like a kind of like a training engineer type person, and it sounded like kind of like a position meant to create the training materials and conduct the training for
Hmm.
astronauts using like the Dragon as an
Yeah.
example. That sounded kind of compelling because I mean you're like not buried into the weeds, but you're familiar with them and you're like getting direct access to like the operations piece. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah. If that's the way you think and kind of how you're wired with your software background, I would really take a strong look at systems engineering.
Systems engineering.
Yeah, and here's why. So, um, systems engineering is the glue between all the components and all the functional areas, right? And you're supposed to be a mile wide and an inch deep, which is kind of what you just talked about with the training thing, right? You get to touch a little bit of everything, and you're engaged with everybody, and you're trying to make it all kind of fit, but you're not expected to be an expert in any one particular area. You just got to know enough to be dangerous, right? And then make all that mesh together. Well, the way all that meshes together typically is through simulation software and through analysis software that integrates all the components, kind of like the system that you've been developing that you just talked about. So an example would be Insight Maker, right? If you're not
Insight
familiar with
maker.
that, yeah, I
I
would check that out. It's free, um, or really the most popular one. And so Insight Maker's free, and it kind of gives you a quick synopsis of how systems engineering, system modeling works. SysML, systems modeling language, is built around the programmer community. I guess I would say software engineering community, and SysML is what drives a lot of model-based systems engineering and those types of things. The other thing that you can check out is Analytical Graphics Inc., AGI, and their STK tool and what's called digital mission engineering. So digital mission engineering takes digital twins of systems, high fidelity digital twins. And by digital twins, that means not just like the physical model of it from CAD, but also like the performance parameters, like what kinds of materials it has, what kind of radiation um, pattern the antennas have, all those kinds of things, pushes it into a multi-physics environment, and then shows how it will perform. And so digital mission engineering is an emerging career field. It's really big up in your area. Um, and there's just that whole world that just really seems to me to be a very nice bridge from where you're at to the space industry as a whole. Um, and then I know that there are jobs with LIDOS at NASA Ames in the operations centers, um, to do the mission operations supporting the hunt for water ice as well on the lunar surface.
Yeah, I did mention I work for a company in San Francisco, but I actually work out of my house in Houston, Texas. So my
Oh, well,
backyard
there you go.
isn't is a
Got
little
it.
bit different than what you might be imagining.
Okay, got it. But say similar story though in general though. Systems engineering is a really nice place for people with heavy software development backgrounds to roost, and there's a
Now,
huge demand.
what's a good sort of first step in terms of getting up to speed on that, like some type of introductory?
So what I would do is I would do the MIT open courseware um, on fundamentals of systems engineering. Oliver DeWick, DE space WEECK, I think is the professor,
Okay.
and he does a really good job. And I had no idea that MIT was sort of the primary go-to for NASA for systems engineering, but apparently they are. And then there's the NASA Systems Engineering Handbook, 2017 version, I think is what it is. Between that course and that handbook, you'll get a pretty solid idea of sort of what it's about. But Oliver DeWeck's course, which I mean, you can just jump on YouTube and MIT Open Courseware Systems Engineering Fundamentals, and it'll come right up. That is kind of a really good introduction to what systems engineering is about at a fundamental level. And they have a lot of space examples that they use for sample missions, and he just does a good job introducing it. I learned about systems engineering by going to an analytical graphics conference on digital mission engineering. They had one here in LA. They're generally welcome just about anybody that's anywhere close to the industry. I'm sure AGI's got, especially with Houston, I'm sure they've got things down in there. But if you go to Analytical Graphics website, the bulk of their staff, I'd say probably 70% is systems engineers. So you can kind of see what the AGI SDK tool is about, and that's a pretty good example of what system engineering is as well.
Wow, that is really amazing. I mean, a lot of the times with these interviews, every single interview, I guarantee you, I have learned something new, either about the world around us, about my fellow human being, about myself, about, something else. But I feel like I just, kept pulling the arm on the, thing, and it just
Slot
paid off,
machine. Yeah. Well, I'm glad. I hope so. It's as a veteran trying to transition the space industry, I've really it's been an interesting challenge. And so I started doing a little bit of volunteer work also with the Space Foundation. And what's interesting is the head of the Space Foundation is a retired admiral. Their VP of operations is a retired Air Force officer. And they're trying to make an initiative to get more veterans in the space industry. And they're trying to figure out how to build these maps, these roadmaps for people like in your situation and others who are trying to transition into the space industry and don't really are having a hard time kind of finding their place and figuring out, where are the bridges and how do I cross them and where do I get access and all those things. And that's a project I'm working on with them now for veterans and what are called returners, people who are coming after a career break. A lot of them are women. For example, if they had a kid that had special needs or whatever, they had to kind of stop working for a few years to take care of that child. And then they've got to try, kind of come back into the working world, and they want to go in the space industry, and they're transitioning from a different industry. That's a lot of change. And so it's been really interesting having conversations with those folks as well. So you're not alone in working hard to figure it out. And the industry recognizes that as an issue, that there's my impression, and actually I really want to hear your perspective on this. My impression is that there's lots of people who are interested in space exploration and would like to participate. They're just not sure where they fit.
I think
What do you
it's
think about that?
I think that may be true to some extent, but I think even before that, there's a lot of people that feel like it's a very niche, esoteric thing. Either you have to be exceptional and highly committed, and there's very few jobs, or, it's like there's really not much future in it, which is kind of funny considering the whole uh, long-term things. But I think a lot of people, really believe. I think there's a large group of people that believe in the end of the world, first of all, and I really don't see humanity going beyond Earth. That at some point the simulation is going to stop, and or
Interesting.
but that's just a gut feeling. Not anybody's really said that. It's
Right.
just based upon kind of some things. And part of the, I mean, people have said, we shouldn't go to the moon because we've messed up the Earth. Why would we mess up the moon too? Which is kind of a curious line of reasoning. It seems very, but they have no trouble tearing down, forests to build neighborhoods because everybody's
Right.
doing that. It's okay to mess up things as long as you're messing them up in a way that millions of other people are already messing them up. You got to mess it up as a group.
Got it.
Uh, but
Interesting.
I don't think space is real for a lot of people, and I think for a long time, space was kind of imaginary with like Star Trek and Star Wars and that type of thing. But I think it's even falling out of not being imaginary for the bulk of humanity either. Um,
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting comment. As you're continuing this, I'm sure there's folks, and I'm happy to make introductions if you want them. I'm sure there's folks at Space Foundation who would really be interested in hearing the insights and perspectives that you're gaining as you're doing this project and this program and what you're learning as far as outreach and with space to folks. I think they'd be really interested in talking to you and hearing from you.
yeah, and I would kind of also like to understand what their questions are. And is there a way to get some anecdotal answers to those questions through this process? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're open to it, I'd like to introduce you to Rich Cooper. And what I'll do to Rich is just suggest that he jump on one, be your guy for a day on one of these calls. And I think he'd really be interested in sharing his perspective, and working with, and he does outreach for Space Foundation. It's a big part of what he does. And then, kind of what you're experiencing. And I think the two of you would have a really fascinating conversation.
that would be fantastic.
I'll make sure to do that.
And talking about those bridges, I feel like there's a very big bridge that we need to build between, say, middle school and early career. Uh, you know,
Yes.
because it's like that high school, college level is where you have a lot of people who really were maybe passionate about space that are being directed towards, more realistic things.
Yes. Yes. And you're absolutely right. It's so they have the Center for Education and Innovation is the Space Foundation's big thing. And I think you're right. I think late elementary and early middle school is kind of the target for that as well. And so I'll give you a great example. Middle school, I went to a summer space program thing where we converted a short bus into a space shuttle and deployed a satellite at City Hall was the project. And I was very passionate about it, so passionate that when the bus caught on fire because a fan was left running in there, I put my hand through a glass cover on a fire extinguisher to save the bus.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, that's pretty dedicated, right? Guess how many space industry people followed up with me after that? Zero.
Zero. Mm.
And so and everything you said, the realistic careers kind of get in your face and say, hey, this is the future, and it's hard to argue with them, right? With the space shuttle being retired,
Mhm.
us kind of dinking around a little bit on Soyuz capsules getting up to the ISS, moon exploration just done, except for a few satellites. It's hard. The space industry is now getting big enough where I think it's going to get easier for people to see themselves in it and to see a future in it. But you're right. We're certainly not there where people would just openly accept that idea. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And there was like a point when being an astronaut was like being the pinnacle of achievement. And
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been watered down too, which I think is a good thing, right? Because we would like it to be more accessible. But it did.
Yes and no. So it's interesting. So let's look at the latest generation of astronauts. Okay, the guy that was up there when Doug and Bob made it up there, the incumbent American, was a SEAL.
Hmm.
Okay, and then they've got one guy on the new Artemis generation, who was a SEAL and a doctor. And so, and those people you just can't relate to them. Like, okay, 12,000 people applied, and they picked the guy who's got a trident on his chest and a medical doctorate degree. It's hard for now. At the same time, though, 12,000 other people applied. So that's interesting. But I agree with you that it maybe has been watered down a bit, or it's just like most people don't even know the path to become an astronaut, and
Well,
they're not sure why they would do it.
maybe so you got like the water down in the sense of there was a time when if he walked on the street, there'd be like everybody would be interested in him. But he could kind of walk down the street and people were like, "Oh, you're an astronaut, okay, whatever," you know. But on the other hand, uh, it's like so difficult to become. To your point, you know, you have to be a SEAL, a medical doctor, have a PhD in 3 physical sciences, and you know, be a public relations expert.
Right.
But then down the other side of that, your reward is, you know, just to be one of the people.
Yes. Yeah. And and it's interesting. Space Foundation's made that point as well in one of their papers, basically saying that astronauts try and talk about space exploration and they get less attention than the YouTube personalities. And part of it's like saying, well, don't fight that. Yeah, Scott Manley's got 1.1 million followers, and he probably teaches more people about space every day than Space Foundation has reached in the last 2 years or 3 years. Figure out how to work with him instead of pointing to him as a I don't know, adversary, I guess. But no, what you're saying makes sense, and I can agree with that. And I feel like the astronaut community sort of feels the same way. But you know what? Let's be honest. They they're just doing what the last 60 astronauts before them did, and I think that's the difference. They're not pushing the boundaries anymore.
Oh, right.
You
I
know,
mean, they're not, they haven't explored, they haven't turned over a boulder and discovered, oh my gosh, we had no clue that was there.
right, right. They didn't find any orange rocks on the surface of the moon.
Oh, we know everything that's on the International Space Station. If there's a surprise, somebody messed up.
Right, absolutely. Um, yeah. So Nathan, I've got to get back to my family. This is my birthday today, so we're actually
Oh, happy
celebrating my birthday.
birthday.
Thank you, thank you. But I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope to check in with you again in the future, because I think what you're doing is really fascinating. I applaud your courage in doing it and your discipline. Um, I will definitely make that in. I don't think we're connected on LinkedIn, but I'll fix that problem,
Okay.
and then I'll introduce you to Rich Cooper, who I think you would really enjoy talking with. Um, and I think as you two kind of do your thing, I think you'd gain some interesting insights from each other. I'm going to continue my adventure on the systems engineering thing. There's space operations systems engineering, which I think you should be able to find pretty easily there in Houston. Or Embry-Riddle would be a solution. And then there's kind of spacecraft systems engineering, which right now the strongest program there seems to be Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. And Johns Hopkins APL is also hosting the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium. And it's free to join the consortium. I recommend you look it up. And they've got a big blue sign up button right on there. And worst case, you jump in there, you meet a few people, and you make some connections, and honestly, I think there's a lot of people involved with that group that would be really interested to hear what you're learning as you're talking about the upcoming missions. As well, so that's something to consider. I know you're probably neck deep in a million other things, but I'm just kind of sharing the resources that I've gained. Where I meet people all the time through LSIC, NASA, industry, academia, across the board, and I'll pitch my, so I've got a hopper design that I'm really pretty proud of, and I'm continuing to develop as part of my degree program. And Nikki Workhauser, who is in charge of lunar surface innovation, she's with NASA, said, hey, I'm really interested in hoppers. And I said, oh, well, that's good because I've got a hopper design I've been running around with and people are really interested in it. And then, and this is during somebody else's presentation, and I had 3 or 4 people say, hey, I want to see your hopper design. I'm interested in that. And, tell me about the Delta V and tell me about this and tell me about that. And so, just side chat comments during a presentation, you make connections and even just saying, hey, I'm doing this project. I'd like to talk to folks about the Artemis missions. Anybody want to jump on my list? And then you make more connections and more connections.
That sounds awesome. I definitely will sign up. I'll also send a follow-up email to you just to connect on some of the things. And I really appreciate your time. I understand about the family and the weekends. I often run into that myself.
I get it. I get it. All right, brother. Well, look, I really enjoyed this, and I hope we stay in touch.
You bet, Tim. Okay, have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. You too, Nathan.